Peace. This is your girl, Isis Wisdom of the Isis Wisdom Show. I have a very exclusive interview. I've been trying to get these people on my show for like a year, and finally I got a chance to find the sisters. I'm getting ready to interview two sisters who were abducted by extraterrestrials, Erling V. Carr and Shirlene Wallace, author From the Motherland to the Mothership, and I'm really, really excited. How are you ladies doing today?
Hi, we are wonderful. Thank you for having us on. We're very excited to be here.
Hi, Isis. This is Arlene.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, great. Thanks.
I know they were really excited when I was promoting it online. They were like, "Oh my goodness, I can't wait for these ladies. You've been waiting to hear something from them for the longest," and so I finally got you guys here. So for those who haven't read your book, could you kind of give us a brief synopsis about what your book is about?
Certainly, I'll be more than happy to. The book, From the Motherland to the Mothership, details my personal, and I'm Shirlene, and our voices sound alike, so sometimes people get us mixed up. So we'll try to remember to identify ourselves. But our book describes my personal interactions with extraterrestrials over a 3-year period, beginning in December of 1995. I had experiences a couple of times a week, 2 to 3 times a week. I would be taken to different planets, interact with different extraterrestrials, different alien life form, receive incredible information, incredible information from these visitations, and then I was brought back to my home. And, of course, the first person I always shared this information with my sister, who has always been, ever since she was a child, a very big advocate and interested in alien life form and extraterrestrial life on other planets. So that's what details of the book is primarily about.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Are you guys near any speakers? I'm hearing like an echo in the background.
I hear the echo, too. Let me see if it's from the computer. I'll turn that off if it is. One moment.
It may be that we're on different phones and close to each other.
Right.
Is that better?
Yeah, I don't hear the echo anymore right now.
Okay. I think we were just too close to each other with separate phones.
Okay. All right. And so that's, first of all, I just want to say that you're like the first people, first African Americans that I know of that's gotten abducted by extraterrestrials. Can you please tell me what was that experience like? Like, talk to me about your first experience, like when it first happened. Like, what was your whole process?
Oh, sure. Okay, I'd love to. It began in December of 1995. It was just a typical Saturday night. I was talking to a friend, a girlfriend, a close friend from our hometown, Wichita, Kansas, about her experience with a relationship she was involved in. She was very distraught, and the relationship wasn't going very, very well, and I was trying to cheer her up, make her feel positive. I've been reading, I should back up and say I've been on a spiritual path since my divorce. I ultimately moved to Dallas to relocate and be with my twin sister. And so I had been on a spiritual path and reading about the fact that we create our own reality, and how to me that was so important to learn, that we actually can create the reality we choose. And that was profound information to me, because I looked back at my life and I thought, well, if I can create my own reality, now I can change things to make them more of what I want them to be. And so, to me, that was powerful information. And I was sharing this with my girlfriend, who was, as I said, very distraught over a relationship that had gone amiss. And I was cheering her up. I was saying, hey, everything happens for a reason. We create our own reality. There's purpose and lessons to be gained, to be learned, and they're valuable. Don't miss the lessons. Look at what happened, and be grateful for the experience that you did have. And so we talked for a while, and she started feeling better, and we hung up. And I went to bed. It was about 10 o'clock when we finished our conversation, and it was a typical Saturday night. I think I may have watched a sitcom on television, went to bed, and fell asleep. The next thing I know, I woke up on a ship. Now, how I got there on that particular experience, I don't recall. I just know that I woke up on a ship, and I knew it was so real, because I could just remember the details of the ship. I could remember traversing the galaxy. I remember how incredibly beautiful the galaxy was. The galaxy was alive and teeming with life. I saw all type of things coming into contact or coming near our ship, and then they would veer off and not hit our ship. It was like an intelligence that existed that knew we were there, and we never collided. It was just strange to have. If two cars were to come that close together, they would collide. But things would come toward us but never hit us and veer right beside us. I was looking at all this activity, comets and things that you don't typically get to see close up. I was just amazed. It was very incredible sight to experience, to see all this teeming activity. And so I found myself on a square-looking bed, tan sheets, and in an empty room. And this vehicle I was in appeared to have maybe a 2 foot or 2 size window that went along the perimeter of the ship, in which I could look out at the galaxy, and I saw just beautiful life. It was just black, dark, jet dark, but yet there was this activity and life going on. We approached a city which looked like the skyscrapers of New York City, and that's the first thing I thought of because it was so well lit up. And I was viewing it on what looked like I called it I can't remember that. There is a game that you used to play, and you could play, and Etch-a-Sketch. And it looked like the outline of an Etch-a-Sketch because the buildings were just, although now I know it was probably computer-generated image I was viewing of a city that we were approaching. And, again, I saw just skyscrapers and buildings on top of buildings beyond buildings, and just everywhere there were buildings. And I also found that I wasn't alone in that experience. It was very, very odd, very strange occurrence, but when I looked over to my right, I happened to see someone very familiar who was, in my opinion, was my ex-husband, who I think was there he was still in my mind, in my vibrations, in my thoughts, but they apparently were able to create him in that setting, and this person who looked like my ex-husband was just so much in control of the situation. I tried to be in control of what's going on. Where are we? How do we get back? Blah, 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 blah. And he was that's the way he was in real life. So they had him down to a T, but, again, I don't believe it was truly him. I think it was a created image to comfort me in knowing that someone I knew was familiar in this setting where I was. This is all that occurred on my first trip. And then I woke up in my bed. Somehow I was transferred back to my bed, woke up at about, I guess it was 2, 3 in the morning, and I knew something had happened. I knew I had been gone. I didn't know how it had happened, but I knew instinctively that I had been taken away from my bed, taken out somewhere. I knew I had traveled because my body felt so strange. It felt so very, very different than normal. I think my heart was racing. I felt chills throughout my body. I felt my body was recollecting, and I felt like it had been molecules before, and it was recollecting into physical matter. And I know that sounds strange,
wow.
But I felt like I was broken down, and when I was returned, I was reassembling into physical matter. And so I got up out of the bed. I knew something was seriously wrong here because how could something like this happen? So my thought was similar to most humans. They would think was someone broke in and kidnapped me and took me away or put me on drugs, or I had some kind of crazy food that night in a weird dream, or I'm pacing the floor in the middle of the night trying to figure out exactly what happened. I thought of calling the police, reporting that somebody broke in and took me away and blah, 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 gave me drugs, and I hallucinated. That's what I thought. And then I thought, well, maybe that happened, or maybe I really went out into the galaxy onto a ship and had this actual experience. So I knew I had to figure that out, and it wasn't easy. Pacing around in 3 a.m. in the morning, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning, trying to make sense of it, but I knew I couldn't call the police. The police can't. They're not able to even understand something like this. They would probably want to refer you to a mental ward in a hospital. So I knew I couldn't do that. But I knew that I had this experience. And so first thing I could do, thought of, is calling my sister, who was really fascinated by this whole subject. She had for a number of years.
We're echoing again, by the way. We're starting to echo a little bit.
Okay, we're separated again. She had to run and shut the door.
Oh, okay.
So I called her. First thing I did, I didn't want to wake her in the middle of the night, so I called her the next morning. And I said, "You're never going to believe this. Guess what happened to me?" And so I'll let her take it from there. If you would like to hear her reaction.
Yes.
Well, I was shocked. She called and she said, "You're never going to believe what happened to me last night." So my first thought was she went out to a club and met a great new guy because, she was getting back, as she said, into the dating scene. And, here and there she'd tell me about various men she had met. So that's the kind of story I thought I was about to hear. But when she said, "I went into the galaxy last night, I was taken aboard this ship," and she describes this being that looked like her husband and how it traversed the galaxy, I said, "Stop, get over here, come to my house and tell me every single word." I was shocked. I was excited. A lot of people asked me, "Did you believe her?" I said, "Of course I believe her. It's my twin sister. How could I not believe her?" And I was just, so she ran over. It was early one Sunday morning I will never, ever forget in my life. It's still very vivid in my mind. And she described everything that she has shared, how she saw ships veering towards her ship, and they would go off and not hit her ship, which told her that they were engineered by intelligence. And the marvels of the universe, how it was teeming with life, and everything that she just shared. So that I wasn't at all in doubt, but I was extremely excited and couldn't wait to hear every single word she had to share.
Wow. So now, can you describe what the ship looked like?
Yes, it was circular. It was very sterile looking, very steel looking. It had a window that was circular that went around. It was near the top of the ship, and the window went around the perimeter of the ship, and it allowed one to look out through the window. And that's basically all. And the bed, I don't know that it was a bed, but it appeared to be a big square, tan-looking bed type structure that I was lying on. And that's all I can recall about that particular ship. I've had so many experiences with other ships, but that is all I recall about that one.
I was going to ask you now, do you ever recall during your experiences with other ships seeing any ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics or any type of signs, symbols, or anything like that on the ships at all that you could recollect? Okay.
I did not see anything like that.
Okay.
That I can recall.
Okay, now talk to me about the beings now. Like,
okay.
Who were they? Like, why did they take you? Like, what was the purpose of that?
Well, I like the back. That's a great question. We get that a lot of times. My sister, I'd like to have her share because I believe there's an interesting link because we're identical twins, and she has had a fascinating curiosity around this subject, whereby I was not as deeply interested in it as she was. So, Erlene, take it away.
Well, just to give you my background, as Shirlene has stated, I always had a fascination with the subject of ufology. I can remember being back in the 4th grade and going to the library to write a report, and I was looking through the encyclopedia. Of course, this was way before the Internet, and I saw what they called back in those days a flying saucer. And the thought of intelligent life on other planets totally enthralled me at that early an age. And, as I grew up through the years, I didn't think about it much anymore. But then I guess in my late 20s and 30s, I really started reading and delving into it because I totally believed that our government had a secret in terms of their knowledge of extraterrestrials and their visitations. I was angry over the fact that we as the American public really had the right to know. How dare they keep this from us? So I wanted to dig and dig and dig and get every little bit of information I possibly could on what was really going on. So I read other people's accounts. You may have heard of the Betty and Barney Hill story.
Yes.
It was it was made into a movie, The Interrupted Journey. And then I looked at the Andreessen affair and some of the abduction stories, if you will. And then I also read a lot of official reports like the Condon Report and many other reports that showed that the government did indeed have a very strong interest in what it was that was invading their skies that they had no control over. but they had decided through the Brookings Institute, which was a think tank back in the 60s, that to tell the American public about this would do nothing but disrupt society as we now know it. And they looked at tribes of people in which advanced cultures had come into and how that particular sociology of that environment of that tribe was totally disrupted. And they said that this would become the same problem if they indeed told us about extraterrestrials. So it's been kept a secret, but now in the advent of camcorders and cell phones and YouTube, it's something that I believe the disclosure is inevitable. They've got to finally, at some point in time, admit it. Other countries are coming out with their decades of UFO investigations and are telling their citizens that they have been studying it. Here's the reports. And so since the United States is, quote, unquote, the leader of the world, it would stand to reason that it's just a matter of time before our government is really forced to do the same thing, to follow suit. They should have led the way, but it looks like they'll have to follow suit because France, Germany, Brazil, and several other countries have already led the forefront in disclosing information to their citizens about their studies of UFOs. Even in the Vatican, one of the top people in the Vatican said that it does not negate the fact that there are extraterrestrials and being able to believe in Christianity, that God can create a universe of many different types of beings. And so for that to come out of the Vatican, I thought was very, very significant. And they're trying to give it their approval, and I think they're doing it in a way they're spoon-feeding us. They don't want to give us too much too fast, so little by little we're going to, I think, learn more and more that's going to be spilled out. But I want to go back to your question because my sister I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book, but my sister had the experience of being taken to Mars. And
right.
On that planet, she was told that black people did indeed dominate that planet. And so, Shirley, I'm going to throw it back to you and let you share a little bit about that. And then, and I have studied Egyptology, and I did draw some correlations between ancient Egypt and what has been found on Mars. So, but I'll let Shirley pick it up here.
Okay, and I want to back up one more time to your original question, how did I get started? And basically that's how it started, with my sister Earlene's interest, her avid interest in this subject. She studied it. She's got numerous books on the subject. She's read them over the years. She used to call me when I lived in Kansas and share with some information about books she's read. I may pick up a book and I may read it or may not. It was a passing interest on my part. I didn't have the interest that Earlene had with this subject. I was living my life, raising my children. They were in school. I was married, and just living a normal everyday life. I finished college and just was going through different life experiences. So this was not something on the forefront of my mind. I did not really think this is something that would ever happen to me. And then when I, again, divorced, relocated, moved to Dallas, I had the experience of space started. And we believe, it's part because we're identical twins and we believe there is a shared soul. At least Africans believe that identical twins, share the same soul. And so I believe what Earlene was fascinated with and interested in, I believe is what happens as far as me experiencing or manifesting it. Earlene hasn't, we haven't gotten this far in the interview yet, but she has mentioned that she had a little fear factor as far as extraterrestrials or visitations.
I wasn't ready for them to come see me, Isis. I can read about them all day long, but I was not ready to actually interact or see one.
Right. And whereby I had dropped the fear factor because I've read, again, a number of spiritual books in regard to our letting go of fear. What you fear, you create. So when you learn to let go of fear, you don't create that experience. And when you realize that you cannot be destroyed, you cannot be hurt, nothing can damage or destroy the soul. Certainly the body can be destroyed, but that is just a vehicle we're wearing for this lifetime. We'll discard it at some point anyway. So when you understand that nothing can destroy the soul, you have nothing to fear. And so I started really integrating this information, this knowledge into my mind, into my psyche, into my essence of my being. And I was just open. I had become in love with the world, in love with everybody in it, and in love with life, and certainly the fact that we create our own reality. And with that vibration, I think that was the creation of a vibration. And vibration, of course, is energy. Energy creates everything. Everything is energy. And with that thought, which is vibration, with that energy around me, surrounding me, a part of me, I think I became a perfect vehicle for this experience to begin in my life. And again, with Erlene's interest and then my readiness, I think that's how this started in my life and how it occurred.
So you were like a beacon. So you became a beacon, so to speak, and I guess they came in. Now, can you talk to me? Like, did they tell you their names? Like, did they tell you what did they tell you about themselves and who they were and why they came and so forth? Yes. What did they tell you?
Be more than happy to. I had so many experiences over the 3 years. My sister brought up the Mars one. That's one of our favorites. That's one of my favorites, too, and I think it's one of my favorites because it's one of my sister's favorites. But in that particular experience, I was taken to the planet Mars, and I was told, I asked, and I was told I was on the planet Mars. And I was in a laboratory setting. Oftentimes my experiences involved being in a laboratory, receiving some type of physical examinations. And I don't know why they were doing the examinations, but that's what they were involved in. And so in this particular experience, I was speaking to this doctor who was doing the examination, and I was trying to find something in common. As you know, when you're with people or you're interacting with doctors or nurses or whatever, you're just trying to make a little idle chit-chat. So my thought was I'll make some idle chit-chat with this person, entity, I don't know what. They looked human. It was a human-looking Caucasian male. So as he was examining me, I said, by the way, did you know that our planet has found a rock that has supposedly traveled all the way from Mars and landed in the Antarctica, and that this particular rock had organisms on it that represented that life existed on Mars many, many millions of years ago. And I thought, this was a great topic of conversation. I'm on planet Mars, so why not tell them about our Earth's finding of a particular rock that traveled from Mars? And so it was exciting to me to know that we had found a rock that had these microorganisms on it that represented life could have existed on Mars. So I shared this with this man, this entity, I should say. And he had no reaction. He had his face was just numb, just basically no emotion, no reaction to it. And then he looked at me and he said, and I'll never forget these words, "We are well aware of your findings." And that was it. We are well aware of your findings. He wasn't much, in my opinion, he wasn't much of a conversationalist, but that's what he responded. So he continued the examination. He didn't offer any more information. But then a woman came out who had overheard the conversation I was having with him, a back room. She came out, and she looked as though she was a black woman, doctor-type individual. And she had overheard the conversation about this, me telling him about this rock that traveled millions of years from Mars. She overheard the whole conversation, and she said something profound to me. I never could have made this up in a million years. She said Mars was predominantly black. And I did not know what to say. That was shocking. I didn't have a shocking reaction at the time, but now later on thinking about it, it was quite a profound statement. Mars is predominantly black. And number one, I didn't know why she was telling me that. And although she was black, that's obvious she was black. But the ideal that I traveled to another planet through another portal or dimension, that was profound in itself. But then for someone to tell me that this planet was predominantly black, that was kind of confusing and shocking. But of course, after the experience, I told my sister about it. I always tell her, usually I call her at the middle of the night. Now she says, call me in the middle of the night. I don't care, call me. So I call her immediately. It's like early first thing the next morning. I said, guess what? I was taken to Mars, and here's what happened, and here's what they told me. And I'll let her share why she thought, if you want to, Erlene, why you thought that was so profound.
Well, like I mentioned, I had studied Egyptology to a certain degree, and I believe it was so interesting to me because it created a correlation between black people living on Mars and black people on our planet. What she learned from Mars really substantiated some of the things I had read and learned. For instance, Richard Hoagland wrote a book called The Monuments of Mars. In the monuments, and he's a former NASA consultant. You've heard of him, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you probably know then that he did some studies of the planet, the surface of Mars, and in an area of Sedona, he found a pyramid, and he also found what is called a face of Mars. Now, he likened the face of Mars to the ancient pharaohs, and he said it was eerily similar to the death mask worn by the Egyptians. And not only that, what I also found interesting was that Cairo in Arabic, El Karaha, really means Mars. So the capital of Egypt, Cairo, meant Mars in Arabic. So that was an interesting correlation. And then he drew correlations between the longitude and latitude of the pyramids in Giza and those on Mars, which were the exact same in terms of their mathematics, their longitude and latitude. He found that both of them equaled the universal equivalent of pi. And so he drew all these correlations, so it just to me meant that there was a great possibility that our ancestors did indeed travel from Mars and start civilization in Africa, which we know is the civilization, the origin of civilization on this planet. So I just found it so intriguing, and it was, again, corroboration. But and let me go just a little bit further, because this is really, really interesting what happened later. After my sister told me about this experience, within, I don't know, a couple of months or so, I met this young Ethiopian woman, and she worked in a 7-Eleven store, and I used to go in and buy coffee in the morning and just general, how you doing, nice weather today, nothing major, just chit-chat. And then something was different this morning. Something said, tell her about your sister's experiences of going to Mars and being told that black people dominate the planet. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. This young lady will think I'm crazy. But the feeling was unrelenting, and it just continued to urge me on and on and on to share it with her. So I get my coffee, and I'm inching up to the front of the line, and I'm finally up to pay for the coffee, and I just go ahead and blurt it out, not knowing what she's going to say. And I said, my sister's been having some really strange and interesting experiences lately, and one in which she was taken to Mars, and she saw people, and she saw black and white people, and she was told that black people dominate that planet. So I just wait to see what she was going to say. I really didn't have any clue, but I just felt, like I said, an unrelenting urge to share it with her. And she said, yes, this is true. We learned in our books in our history books back in Ethiopia that our ancestors came from the planet Mars. I said, what did you say? I was totally shocked. I tell you, I was not expecting that answer, but that also corroborated what my sister learned. And then I met another older sister. She was, I would say, the first one was in her 20s. The second lady was in her 40s, and she had an African dress shop here in Dallas, and I loved buying African attire and wearing it. And so I said, well, let me ask her and see what she thinks and has to share, and see what she can bring to this subject. So I told her the same story about my sister going to Mars and learning that black people dominate the planet. And she really expounded on it. She said, yes, this is true. Our ancestors come from the planet Mars, but they came to the planet Earth and what we call Africa to mine the gold. And she said, but because of the influence of Islam and Christianity, both having their own stories of the origin of man, that was suppressed. You didn't talk about your ancestors coming from Mars anymore, so it went underground. And she said the only place you can learn about that now is if you can find African elders, and they will tell you that our ancestors came from Mars. And she said not only will they tell you this, they'll show you shrines that they still have dedicated to our ancestors from Mars.
Oh, man,
I was
that's
blown
crazy.
away, Isis.
But you know what, though? I'm starting to think, with space is melanin. You know what I'm saying? It's dark matter. So I'm beginning to think that probably the majority of the planets are probably ran by people of color, or anything that's the least closest to the sun, that in order to sustain life, you would have to have melanin. You know what I'm saying? So I'm already, I was already on that. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just went, yeah, it just makes, scientifically it makes sense. If we're being governed by a sun, then scientifically it makes sense. It's probably if there are other life beings on the planet, that they would be dark beings of some type.
Right.
That's right.
And, I also neglected to mention, I think was very fascinating to learn.
Shirlene, you should say you're Shirlene again.
I'm Shirlene. I'm sorry. The doctor-looking individual showed me a computerized map on the wall, and it showed mountains and valleys and terrain, and it showed areas that were inhabited. And one of the place we were in, he told me, was called YU. And I thought that was very interesting because it looked as though life existed there, and what I was seeing was different from what our scientists have been showing us. They're showing us a red planet, lifeless, no life, no nothing, and
Desert,
that was not
red.
my experience.
Now, okay, and I'm glad. Now, I was just getting ready to go there. I was just getting ready to ask you, now, during that experience of you actually traveling into Mars, you know, all our lives, first of all, we've been taught through astrology to fear Mars. This is the planet of war, or blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's first and foremost. So you already know off the top, you know what I mean, we were already trained and brainwashed to have a negative connotation on the planet Mars. And then on top of that, they told us that there was no life on the planet, yada, 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 of course, the lies. So now I'm going to ask you straight up, is there plenty of life on the planet Mars?
Yes. Now, I didn't get outside in that particular experience to see it, but later I did return to Mars, and I was able to see life just like we know it. I saw trees. I saw grass. I saw homes, actual homes that looked similar to homes that we live in. I saw I should say black people. That's actually all I saw in that particular experience. So yes, it was very much like Earth. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was so similar to Earth, and it was so stark contrast to what our scientists and NASA is telling us about Mars. And that, made me feel so all alone in my experience, because how do you have an experience where it's totally opposite of everything NASA tells you? But that's exactly what happened, and that's why I felt compelled to tell this truth, to tell my truth anyway, of what I experienced, because I don't believe, as Earlene stated, that we're getting the full knowledge or the full truth about what exists on these on different planets, about the life that exists and the beauty that exists. And so, and it's just a shame. It's not fair to us to be held in the dark. And that's one reason we wrote the book. We felt that it's time that this knowledge came out and this truth has come out. And I know we were one of the few people, African Americans, who have written a book of this nature. We know of one gentleman named Martin Rowley, who has a book called The Coming of Tan. It's an absolutely...
Oh, yeah.
You know Martin, absolutely fascinating story. Also, where he was interacting on a ship over a number of years with an entity called Tan, who he goes in quite a bit of detail as well. So outside of him and us, I don't know of anybody who's written their own actual experiences. But we've had such great response from coming out and telling our truth, and we've had so many people embrace us. And I've received email from around the world, almost, from people who are saying thank you for coming out and telling this experience. I've had similar experiences. I didn't know what to do about it, where to go, who to talk to. I felt alone. I felt crazy. I felt what's wrong with me. And until I read your book, now I know I'm okay. And that's what that book is. That's what we wanted. We wanted people to know you're okay. It's just that your government's saying you're something wrong with you, or they're not acknowledging your truth. But it doesn't matter whether they acknowledge your truth or not. You need to acknowledge your own truth. You need to know that you are okay. And what is happening to you is true. It's your experience. It's real. It's just real as any other facet of your life, any other part of your life. It's just as important as any other part of your life. So don't denounce yourself. Don't feel like you're strange or you're different, you're unusual, you're abnormal, because you're not, if you're having these experiences. I spoke with one young lady emailed me from England, and she was so grateful because she didn't know. She was like 18, 19, and she was afraid to tell her mother. She couldn't tell her family what was going on in her life. This was going on. Imagine being that young and something like this going on in your life, and you can't even tell your mother, your father, your family. Until I wrote the book, and she read the book, she was just so relieved to know this is okay. It's happening to other people. It's just not me. And so I've received so many we have received so many email and letters of support. We've done numerous interviews over the years about the experiences, about the book, and we've gotten nothing but positive feedback. And we're just glad that we are part of something that's important because it affects all of us. It affects mankind. And we have that, as Earlene said, we have a right to know the truth.
Right. Now, I could tell that it's changed your life, of course, since you've had that experience and whatnot. Have you had the opportunity to visit any other planets besides the planet Mars?
Oh, yes, numerous planets.
Have you been to Neptune yet?
Not Neptune. I haven't seen
Darn,
Neptune.
Man.
I would like
I have
to
a fascination with that planet. I don't know why, but I have a strong fascination with that planet. Every time, I would just go and look for videos just to look at the planet Neptune. It would give me, this calming feeling. I don't know why, but I always had this fascination with it.
You have probably, I would say, that you have a connection with Neptune. Anytime you have a strong urge, a strong feeling, a strong interest in something, it's because you have a connection with it. It's something that's connected to you.
It reincarnated from Neptune to planet Earth. That could be your previous home before this planet.
It could very well be. Actually, I read a book was so interesting. It's called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh.
Oh, yeah.
A fascinating, wonderful book. I think the most important books that have ever been written in our history of mankind. Outside, it even goes further than, of course, the Bible because it's everyday language. This gentleman, Neil Donald Walsh, talks to God, and it's fascinating. But in I think book 3, he talks about extraterrestrial life, highly evolved beings, and it's so interesting because God, through Neil Donald Walsh, validates that life exists on other planets. Life has been visiting, other life form has been visiting us for years on top of years. And we, of course, our government continues to deny its existence. But yet, how can we continue to allow our government to do that? And we seem very passive in doing anything about it, but we need to probably, in my opinion, work toward getting this disclosure, as Earlene mentioned, getting the disclosure out there because it exists, it's real, and it's occurring with a number of people, not just myself, and people ask, why you, or do you think you're any unique or special? And no, I don't. I'm an everyday person. But for some reason, like Earlene said, you probably have a connection with Neptune. For some reason, Earlene and I have a connection with extraterrestrials, with this idea of life on other planets, with the ideal of bringing this truth out to, and we think that's our work too. Part of our work, path, journey on this side of time is to bring this information out and bring this truth out.
Jeez. Now, what have you learned as far as? I want to really get into. So, what has happened here on planet Earth in terms of why things have changed? What have you learned through your experiences? What wisdom has come to you? As far as why we're in the conditions that we're in here on planet Earth, how did this whole thing come about? And also another question I wanted to ask you is that are you familiar with how many actual species there actually are on planet Earth, and are they traveling back and forth from Earth to Mars on a consistent basis?
Well, there are a number of species interacting with mankind. There are a number of races that are interacting with mankind, and our government is aware of some of them. Some of the ones that are very popular in the news have been the Greys. I had one experience with the Greys. One night I woke up wide awake, looking up, sitting in my bed, looking up, and at the end of my bed were 3 Greys. They were what we call the Greys. They were short. They were very shiny, illuminated suits, big black eyes, almost huge. And the only reason I think they visited me is because I was having a conversation with someone. I can't remember who it was. I was saying, that's funny, I've never been visited by the Greys. And certainly as soon as I said that, I had the visitation. And what they did was they just stood at the foot of my bed and looked dead at me, and I'm looking dead at them. And they ultimately levitated up toward the middle of the room, and they totally disappeared. And that they spoke no words or said nothing to me. But so there's so many types of beings that are interacting. There are some that are called the reptilians that many people feel are very negative, dark entities. Again, with all races, in my personal opinion, you have entities that are at various levels of evolution. So you can have some reptilians that are negative and dark, and they exhibit that. Then you can have some that are loving and kind and benevolent. and that's what their energy is. So it's really, it's hard to pinpoint anything. You just have to go, and that's what I did oftentimes. I would go with how I'm feeling. How do I feel in this? And that's what we can ask ourselves, even in our day-to-day interactions with people that we interact with. How am I feeling about this situation? How am I feeling about this experience? Is this a good experience? Is this a good feeling? And you can trust your instinct to know where you are with that experience. But based on the vibration I felt like I was in at the time, which is primarily happy, joyful, loving, I'm trying to be that type of spirit and develop that type of mindset and attitude and vibration. I think I primarily attracted positive entities. I know I do talk about some of the negative ones in the book. The Renegades was a group of negative entities, for example, that visited me. But overall, I've had very, very positive experiences with just a number of beings.
Right. Now, about your experience with the Renegades, share that with me.
Okay. I was working on the book. It was in manuscript form. I'd been working and writing, typing on the computer actually, late one evening, and I became tired and wanted to go to bed, and so I did. And shortly thereafter, I woke and found myself paralyzed, totally paralyzed, unable to move, just totally immobilized, and I couldn't move anything. But my head could move. I'm sorry, my head was already facing the bathroom, which was next to my bed, and the lights. I noticed the lights were going on and off, and this group of entities was. I was just frozen solid, felt like, but I could feel the energy. And this particular entity that hovered over me had a very dark energy, very negative energy. And I asked it its name, and it blurted its name out, although it wasn't in English, so I couldn't repeat it. And I said, "What do you want?" And that's another thing. You can always ask, "What is it you want?" So I asked, "What do you want?" And it just started speaking in this other language I couldn't understand, and it was just a tirade of words I couldn't interpret, but I knew that it was upset. So as I was lying there with my face locked in position towards the light of the bathroom, I heard, this sounds funny, but I heard urination. I heard a urination sound. So I gathered that individual was saying, "We don't like what you're doing." That's, because someone urinating, and I know it was in relationship to me in the book, and I think it was telling me it did not like what we had put out in this book. So all of a sudden, a flurry of activity started occurring in my apartment. I heard magazines and newspapers and books. All kind of stuff was just being pulled out and rampaged through, and just all type of looking and searching, and drawers being slammed open and shut. And I couldn't understand why all this was going on. Why? What is it they wanted? What were they looking for? But my manuscript was in plain sight. I left it out as I was working on it that evening. I left parts of it out that I was the chapters I was working on. So then I had this impression. I was getting, by the way, I couldn't see any of this. I just had this instinctive feeling that this is what they were doing, because I could hear stuff. I could hear noise. I could hear this activity going on. And so finally, these entities, the noise settled down, and I had this impression that they were reading the book like in microseconds. They could just go through it, and that they were doing that. And I don't know if they were looking for something else that they thought I might have. I don't know what they were wanting or looking for, but I felt they read the book in a series of seconds, if it took even that. And then suddenly they left. The whole air of the bedroom, the whole energy of the bedroom changed after they left. Suddenly I could move my head. Remember, I was stuck with my head in one direction. Suddenly I could move my head, turn it left and right. Suddenly I could move my body. I slowly got up. I felt totally drained. I felt shocked. I felt violated, my home being violated, but I knew that everything was okay. They were gone now. So, again, immediately I called my sister and I said, "Hey, I just been visited, and this group was not a very friendly group. This group was looking for something, looking for information, wanting something. I don't know what else. I had nothing else in the apartment, certainly, but they were after something." And so that was my one experience with a group of negative entities.
Did they school you or educate you about like the Dracos? Like I had people asking in the chat room, where did the Dracos come from? Do they exist? Like is that a real thing?
No, I don't know. I can't respond to that because I have had no information about that particular group or knowledge of it. At least not, and I certainly wasn't educated by any entities. I think I was more. I was being exposed to certain. Every experience was unique in itself, and I think I've got about 33 chapters with different experiences, and they were all very unique. For example, I did go. One of my favorites, and I always like to share this particular one on our interviews, is the Crystal City.
Oh yeah, now talk to me about. Now I was told, and I need you to give me clarification. I was told that there's also crystal cities actually in the middle of planet Earth as well, in the center of the Earth.
Yes, I've heard that.
So when I hear people say about those visitations, a lot of times I'm thinking they might have been taken into the center of the Earth as opposed to outside of the planet. So I was just wondering if you could kind of give me some clarification.
I certainly will try. I can go based on my own particular experience, which was that I was again lifted out of my bed, and I was normally when I'm lifted up, I'm swept up out of the bed, swept through the ceiling, and a ship is hovering nearby, and I'm taken and drawn under it and taken into it. Sometimes I leave also in an astral projected type experience where my spirit or astral body leaves. And while I rest, because I've looked back down on myself and saw myself resting, still sleeping.
Right.
So, but in this particular experience with the Crystal City, I felt like that was more of an astral projected type of a visitation, where I was taken to, it looked like, again, out in the dark galaxy. I don't know. I understand that I have learned lately or more recently, that there are a Crystal City, I've been told, under Earth, in the center of the Earth, which I find fascinating. But I didn't feel like I was in the center of an Earth. In my own experience, I felt like I was up in the galaxy. And I was taken by an entity that stood to my left, and we were just hovering in space, and not moving, just standing there, floating there, I should say, looking at this incredible structure, a Crystal City. It's what I call it. They didn't tell me that it was called the Crystal City. I named it that. But their structures were incredible architecture. The architecture involved pyramids. It involved a dome-shaped type of building. And if you remember the Russian building, I can't think of the name of it, that has the dome at the top. Yeah, like that, like an ice cream cone dome. And I saw one of those, very similar to some of that structure in Russia. That's what the Crystal City looked like, except it was mammoth, and it was all made of beautiful crystal, and illuminated. The crystal seemed to have energy in its own. It pulled you to it. It was so gorgeous. It was so beautiful. It attracted you. You wanted to be inside its halls, inside its walls, inside its essence. It was so gorgeous. And the crystal vibrated different lights of pink and blue shades and green and just soft shades, but beautiful crystal with mammoth buildings. I can't even imagine how anything could be made like that. It was just so beautiful. An entire city that looked like that. And she was showing this, I say she, I don't know, I felt like female essence on this experience, was showing me this beautiful, beautiful place. And I didn't go, as far as I can recall, I didn't go in. I may have gone in and studied and been educated and learned something, but I don't remember it if I was taken inside. I just remember hovering over it, looking at the awesomeness of it, the beauty. There's nothing we can't. Our most beautiful building on this planet couldn't compare to this Crystal City. The beauty. And
you don't know where you don't know where you were, or what part of the constellation and stars you were at the time when you saw it. Because I had heard about that years ago. About that, they was talking about a particular constellation, but I can't even remember anymore. But I had heard about that, and I've always been fascinated with wanting to know if that actually really did exist.
Oh, it does. I visited twice actually, and no, I don't know why. My sister always questioned me on my return visits. Well, did you ask where you were? And no, I didn't seem to do that. I don't know. Sometimes I would. On this occasion, I didn't. sometimes I would ask, what planet am I on? Or where am I? Like Mars. I was told I was on Mars. Jupiter, Nor. I was told I was on Jupiter, Nor. And there's other planets I've been to that, yes, I would ask. But in the Crystal City, it didn't feel like it was a planet, number one. It felt more like a designation, a dimension, a place. Maybe there are places that exist, and this is outside the scope of our thinking, that doesn't require the use of a planet, the needs of a planet, because they are very much on a spiritual level. So they don't require the things that we know of in the physical, the air and ground and trees and grass and all of those things. So this particular place may have been not associated. Crystal City may not have been associated with a planet at all. It could have been a dimension all of its own. It's what I really get more the feeling that that's what it was, a dimension, a destination that's not associated with a physical planet.
Oh, wow. Now, I've never heard that. I've never heard it explained like that before. That's kind of deep.
That's
now
it.
you start.
That's the sense
now
I got.
you got to start right. I mean, that's deep right there.
Yeah, that's the sense. And I talk about another place I visited, city without a planet, that I felt was in a different dimension, and it gave me the same feeling that this particular city, and I didn't even name this city, this place, but I didn't think it was in a planet associated with it. There's so many places. There's one that stands out as fascinating. It was a structure. It looked like a structure that had buildings that, if you can imagine the moon, how the moon illuminates at night. If you can imagine structures that illuminate from within with natural lighting, I was taken to a place like that. I know, if you can imagine a pitch black galaxy, and then you're in a place. Now this probably was again a dimension, but the buildings within it, not really solid buildings, but yet they were buildings that illuminated like the moon from within. They had an essence like the moon, the light of the moon, and a natural lighting. That was a fascinating, and I didn't write about that one in the book. Because there's so many that occurred after I wrote this book, I still continue to have different experiences. So I didn't get them all in the book. Everyone says, why haven't you written a second book? And I just haven't sat down. We haven't sat down and taken the time to do another book. But I've had so many, and I feel so completely blessed with having had so many unique experiences.
Now, why did you name it From the Motherland to the Mothership? Why did you guys call it that?
Erlene, you want to answer that?
Well, you came up with the name, Charlene, and I loved it. Oh, and I just believe one of the reasons was the fact that Africa is the cradle of civilization, so it is our first motherland, although Russia, of course, is called motherland too, but Africa is our true first motherland. And these beings have been coming to visit us on this planet for millennia. So, and we do believe that they come in ships. So Charlene thought of it. I thought it was a great title, From the Motherland, which is Africa, the cradle of civilization, to the mothership, which are the ships that have been visiting, of course, Africa and all parts of the world.
Right.
And, I learned from Merlene because, again, she was an avid reader of this material. And she taught me that our race really interacted with the Dogons, with beings from other planets, and our anthropologists visited with them and tried to learn how they knew about the star systems that existed prior to telescopes being made. And they said they were visited by entities from another planet.
Sirius.
And
You've probably heard about Robert Temple and the Sirius Mystery. If not, he visited, he wrote a book in which two French anthropologists visited with a tribe of Dogons in West Africa. And these anthropologists lived among them for 5 years and gained their trust. And the Dogons told them about a being named Nomo that traveled from the star system of Sirius and came to planet Earth. And this being that came was an amphibious being. And they also, this being named Nomo also told the Dogons that Sirius B travels around Sirius A a precise revolution of every 50 years, that it had an elliptical orbit as compared to a round orbit. And the being gave the Dogon such precise knowledge that our telescope, our scientists could not even see this star system until the last 100 years, because we didn't have a telescope powerful enough to even detect this star system. Yet 5,000 years before Christ was born, this African tribe of Dogons not only knew of this star system, they knew the exact orbit of the star of Sirius B around Sirius A. They knew that Sirius C existed. Our scientists couldn't even see Sirius C. So it was just fascinating to learn that, again, 5,000 years before Christ, we have a story from Africa of an African tribe that were visited by extraterrestrials from the star system Sirius.
And now, so I wanted to tie that in to the title. I wanted to bring that correlation into the title, from the motherland, which is Africa, where all civilization began, to the mothership, because there's a wealth of information that lies in African with the priests and the elders that we have not yet had the opportunity to visit.
Especially Ethiopia, because it's such an old country. There's stories. We had a tape, and I really hate we lost it, and it was a little audio tape cassette. And this African talks about all of these different types of beings that exist in the universe. So we know that they have knowledge that we in Western society have not been privy to as of yet.
But then, with all the traveling back and forth that the beings have been doing inside of planet Earth, I was watching a documentary. Oh gosh, what was the name of the documentary? The Greatest Story Ever Denied. I forgot the name of the guy that put it together, but what he was doing was he was showing, he was putting the cameras in infrared and actually showing cloaked ships in our skies. And then I went and did it, and I saw at least 3 of them hovering over Atlanta, just cloaked. Now it's getting to the point now in Atlanta where they're showing themselves now like they ain't even hiding it no more. It's getting a little ridiculous over here. I have to talk to you about that in a minute. But I'm just saying that when I watched the documentary, he took a telescope, because now with the kind of cameras that we got now, regular people can go buy a nice telescope and actually can see the surface of the sun now. You know what I'm saying, with cameras and whatnot, so you can actually go to the store and buy this stuff. But he actually was filming, there were objects that were floating around planet Earth counterclockwise. He showed that. Huge structures. And then he was showing how the ships were just cloaked. And I'm just saying to myself, wow, it's like they known about us for quite some time, and they just they're intelligent enough to know not to show themselves, or at least, too much where the people don't start freaking out and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? But the question,
shooting at them.
Right, yeah, well, Battle of Los Angeles. You know what I'm saying? When that ship showed up over there, and then they started blasting the thing to death because they didn't know what was going on. They just, everybody freaking out. So I just wanted to know, geez, with all that going on, why do you think now at this particular point in time? And I'm a critical thinker, and I'm careful with the propaganda and the mysticism about a lot of things. And I don't know. When I start seeing things, it seems like there's an agenda. I don't know if there's an orchestrated agenda in terms of, preparing people's minds for maybe a galactic error, or if it's really going on, if it's really a situation where these beings are just saying, okay, we're tired of hiding, so we're just going to start showing our butts now. We're just going to start showing it. Why now? Why so much now?
I don't think it's just now that it's happening. I think it's been happening over a number of years. I think we're getting more and more contact now. We're seeing more evidence of it. And I think it's because we as a species are evolving ourselves to the point where we're ready. We want contact. We want to know about our space brothers and sisters, and they want contact with us. It's like having a lost relative, our parent that you never met, an adoptee. You're going to be curious about each other. So I think we're curious about them, and I certainly know that I believe they want to interact with us. They want to help us. In so many ways, we do need the help. But they don't want to intervene to the degree that they take away our power, or they supersede our power, our choices. They want us to evolve and grow and learn from our mistakes and learn the consequences that are that occur as a result of our actions. So they don't want to intervene, and I believe they try to stay in that particular mode. But yet and still, I believe that some of them, of course, are very benevolent, and they want to assist mankind. They want to help us. We certainly need it. We are on a path. We've been on a path of destruction for a long, long time. We're still on that path, as you can see with the things that have happened, with the nuclear explosions and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they're concerned because once we destroy our planet, it can affect planets nearby us and affect their life so I think they want to help us to clean up our mess, but not clean it up for us, because a lot of people say, well, why don't they just come in here and fix it? They don't want to appear as our gods, because once they come, when they come, we have a tendency, humanity has a tendency to elevate them to the level of gods and fall down and worship them and all of this. They don't want our worship, and they don't need our worship. They want us to understand our power. We have our own power. We have, because of our Christianity and because of various religions, we have been taught that we are nothing, or we are lost, or we are sinners, or we are bad, or all of these negative things, that we have bought into that. And so when anything of higher intelligence approaches us, we all of a sudden want to fall down and worship them as gods. I know they don't want that.
And I think that to me, that would say that was probably the beginning of the downfall of humanity, is whenever they started giving their power away to something else. To me, that logically makes sense to me as to how that happened. Because when you like you said, everything is about energy. So when you start and see there are certain individuals on this planet that also understood who we are as magnetic beings, magnetic electrical beings, and our thought process and how we can project out there. We're just not in tune with our own power. We're not in tune to it. But there are those that are in tune to it that can actually cause mass manipulation amongst the people just by putting bad imagery, bad things out in radio, bad news reporting, what have you, whatever it is that you're being exposed to. They have the ability to manipulate you just by that. And like right now, I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday about how the level of fear that's on this planet is like out of control now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like people are actually manifesting things to happen because of their level of fear, and they don't even realize that the relationship to nature behind that. It's like they don't even realize they're actually causing certain things to happen because they don't even realize their own connection to nature themselves.
Exactly.
Now, peep game. Have you been peeping these storms and earthquakes and things like that that's been taking place here lately?
Yes, very much.
Yeah. Now, talk to me. I knew you had an experience yourself with a storm. And I kind of wanted you to share with my audience about that experience that you had with a storm a couple years ago, I think it was.
Storm?
One of you guys was talking about that. I heard on an interview you were talking about some stuff that was going on where you had some type of experience with a storm.
Well, I had an experience I call it a wastebasket in the sky sort of experience where I was taken out into the galaxy, and I was shown it looked like a lot of smoke. It looked like a Hiroshima episode where we bombed that country, and that's what I was shown. I was shown this mass of smoke and bombings, and it looked like something, of course, that we created. But what the entities were able to do, and I thought this was profound and fascinating, still to this day. I think it's just I can't even conceive of this. It's hard to even conceive of that they have this kind of ability. But they were able to take that waste from that bomb or from that explosion that was just all over in this area of the galaxy, and they had a device that was able to. It was like a suctioning, and it just pulled it back. It pulled it in. It pulled it away. It evaporated it basically, and it was suddenly totally gone. And I don't know, again, I didn't ask them, why are you showing me this? What is this about? I didn't have any conversation about it, but what I'm thinking from that experience, or what I believe, is that they do have the technology to do that if necessary. If we ever set off all these atomic bombs all at once, or and create this warfare, this mass destruction that we're capable of doing, or any country is capable of doing, I think the entities have the ability to evaporate it immediately, which would prevent it from from affecting other nearby planets. And I thought that was just very, very profound. I don't know what the device was, what they were using, how they were able to suck. It's just like if you can imagine a vacuum sweeper, and you take it hose off, and you're sucking debris, dirt up. That's how they were able to suck up our nuclear waste.
Oh, wow. Wow. So now with this situation that's going on over in Japan right now, like, did you get some glimpses into the future of coming events and things of that nature? Because I would assume that would happen since you're already doing interdimensional traveling and so forth. What would you like to tell my audience some of the glimpses that you've gotten as far as future events or future occurrences or something that we have to look forward to or what to expect?
I did not have any experiences that told of our future, and I believe the reason is our future is yet undetermined. I think we determine it as we go. We have, and again, I'm a big advocate of the book, Conversations with God, in which it's fully explained that there are many different avenues and journeys that we can take, and it's not yet even been decided. We're making it up as we go. We're making this all up as we go. We're creating our experiences as we go. So for them to tell me what's going to happen, it's still out. It's still out there. It's the unknown, because it can go many different directions. We can
probable realities.
Probable realities. We can evolve into a species that is loving and kind and considerate and caring about each other and promote peace. Or we can keep on this warlike mentality and continue killing each other and destroying life and war, and continue with war and warfare. We can continue on that path. We can continue that until we destroy ourselves, as I believe other planets have done. So the story is still, it's an open-ended story. It's not yet been fulfilled, because we rewrite it, we create it, we script it as we go.
Wow. Now, I'm glad that you broke it down like that, because a lot of people are kind of like falling into this whole doom and gloom agenda that seems to be pushed rather rapidly and rather hard. The end of the world, 2012, Planet X. Are you? What is your take on the whole planet flyby thing? Have you had any experiences?
I have. I've given it some thought as far as the 2012, the predictions for 2012, and the fact that we could be ascending into another dimension. And I truly believe that, again, it's all about vibration. It's all about where you are, what you think. You create your own reality, not only in this physical lifetime, even in your next lifetime, your next, you'll always create. You're a creator genius. As I've read through these books, a number of books, Conversations with God. I'm also interested in the Abraham tape. Abraham was just Jerry and Esther Hicks, which describes a lot of this too. But we are the genius creators of our own reality, and so as such, wherever we are vibrating, we will ascend to that level of our thought. So it's still an open story. You're right. There's a lot of fear out there now. But when you have fear is the opposite of love, opposite of God. So when you have fear, you're going to create that reality. So if you have fear and you choose fear, and you want to live in fear and choose to live in fear, and that's totally your choice, totally your option to do so, you get to create another reality like that. So if we do ascend into a new dimension in the year 2012, which many people are saying that we are going to do, because we're at the end of a 26,000-year cycle,
right,
and Mother Earth is ascending into another dimension,
yes,
I think you're going to find yourself where you vibrate to. So it's imperative, I truly believe, it's very imperative now that we center ourselves, we ground ourselves, meditate, we treat each other with love, kindness, respect, consideration. We work on our spiritual path, our spiritual growth, our spiritual evolution, that we become balanced and centered, and just take time every day to do that. Take time to check in with yourself, because our truth is always inside of us. No one can really define our truth. It's always inside of us. So if we work on our energy, our vibration, where we're vibrating to, what we're thinking, what are we putting in our thought, in our minds, with what are we watching on television, what kind of books are you reading, what kind of information are you sharing, or what type of stories are you telling? All of these things create, because thought is energy. So I think that's very, very important as to what will occur in the future. That is important as what's occurring in our daily lives. We're
right.
creative in everything we do, in every act, word, and deed. So
Now,
that's
so many
creates our future.
I'm sorry,
Say
Ernie,
again?
would you?
No, I said because that thought is what creates our future.
Yes, that's exactly it. So you'll find yourself where you believe you'll be, or where you're resonating to, where you resonate. So if you believe in warfare, you'll find yourself on a third-dimensional reality like Earth. There's going to be plenty enough, planets available for that type of activity, that type of experience, if that's what you choose. If you want something of peace, of love, of a better world, a better place, you'll resonate to that. It can, that's just, I think that's law. I think the law of attraction, and that's a powerful experience. The law of attraction, again, that's really been discussed a lot by Jerry and Abraham Hicks. Esther and Jerry Hicks. I think it's powerful. That law of attraction says that you attract like kind. Whatever you're thinking, you attract that to yourself, to you. So what are you thinking? So that's what you'll attract. So I don't fear anything that's coming down the pike, because knowing you're the creator of your own reality, you get to choose what's coming,
Right.
what you will experience.
One of my listeners in the chat room asked me, could I ask you about your perspective of the role of religion in your own experiences, if any?
Certainly. I think religion has its purpose. I think it's been important. We, of course, grew up as in the Christian Church, Church of Christ to be exact. I think that as a child, it taught us about God. It taught us about love. It taught us about how to live, and I think that's important for children. But I think it did us a huge disservice, absolutely huge disservice, because it taught us so many untruths, things that are not true. And I believe that it has, of course, has been the source of many, many wars, of much friction, fighting, turmoil throughout our history.
Right.
Yes, throughout our history, because everyone wants you to believe the way they believe. And that's just not possible. We're all unique. We're all different. We all create our own truth and believe in get to choose what we believe. But trying to force religion onto the whole world and to believe the way that you think they should believe, I think that's been a huge mistake. I also believe that the ideal that God is to be feared it's just a misnomer. It's just a total untruth, because God is love. But we were taught to fear God and keep His commandments. Again, there's this book called Tomorrow's God. I'd like to recommend every reader on the call tonight, or on the interview, listening to the interview, buy this book. Again, it's by Neil Donald Walsh, called Tomorrow's God. It talks about this new spirituality, this unfoldment, this evolvement that is occurring right now on our planet. At this time, we have individual people who are more spiritually motivated, more spiritually evolved than we ever have on the planet, ever in the history of the planet, according to this book. So we have an opportunity to embrace greater truths. And what doesn't fit, we can let it go. We can expand on what we've learned and expand on it, but if it doesn't fit for you, if it doesn't resonate with your truth, let it go. Because we can evolve to things that are far greater in anything we've learned in that religion has taught us or hasn't taught us. So I think that's what we get to do.
Better.
And the what?
And that serves us better.
Yes, things that serves us better is very important. So what I dropped Christianity, I dropped major religions, because I don't believe there's a hellfire. I don't believe there's total damnation and destruction. I don't believe the soul is going to be, God's going to judge us or chooses to judge us. I believe that God loves us, and anything outside of that, opposite of that, just simply doesn't make sense. I talk to people a lot about, the fact that God doesn't judge. And I said, well, if you have a child and your child did something that was wrong, would you send them to hellfire for eternal damnation forever and ever? And it didn't make sense to them. When they think about doing that to their own child, it didn't make sense. But yet they think, a lot of people choose to think that God would do that to us. That did not make sense to me. So that's where I dropped the concept of hellfire. And I do believe in reincarnation. Again, that's not discussed in the Bible for various reasons, but we are here to evolve. We can't get it all done in one lifetime. It's too much to learn. We have eternity in which to do it from, and so we get to choose every lifetime, our parents, our place of where we'll live, our skin color, our experiences, every person we pull into our life provides us an opportunity to learn and grow and to evolve spiritually. All of these things our soul choose before we come. And so the idea that, again, that you die and you're going to go to judgment, heaven and hell, and that's going to be the end of it forever, ever and more, no. I think we'll continually come back and learn and grow, evolve, and create, continually create. Then we go back, merge with the Creator or merge with Source for a length of time, and then we come back on this cycle. It's like a cycle, and we forget. We come back and we put the veils down. We forget who we are so we can rediscover and reemerge and recreate and redefine who we choose to be over and over and over throughout eternity.
You're dropping some science tonight, sis.
I'm sorry, you said what?
I said you're dropping some science tonight.
Oh, yes. Again, I get a lot of this from the book Conversations with God. I wish every reader would read those series of the first 3 books at least, because it makes sense. It makes life make sense. All of these questions we're discussing, all these things we're discussing are discussed eloquently in that book as well, and it makes things make sense. We have eternity. And if you don't get it in this lifetime, if you got these lessons you need to learn and you don't get it this lifetime, it's okay. You got the next and the next and the next and the next and the next. So eventually God said in those books, you can't, if I'm your mark, you can't miss me, and I am your mark. So we're going to get it right. It's just when, and there's no time deadline.
And there's really no right or wrong. There's
There's no right or wrong.
It's just all perception.
Exactly. We can't even get it wrong. So it's, as the teenagers say, it's all good.
Right. I got another person that asked. They said, I wonder what her thoughts are on culture knowledge.
On what?
Culture knowledge.
Arlene, you want to take that one?
I think it's important. That's why, well, when I moved to Dallas, I had no knowledge of self in terms of our ancestors and the contributions that we made historically to society at large. Because when you look at our school curriculum, it doesn't give you anything. I can remember thinking that the white man was the first man on this planet, because when I looked at my science book, I saw Cro-Magnon, I saw Neanderthal, and then I saw a picture of a white man. I never saw a black man in there, in that evolutionary cycle. So I thought we as a black people, race of people, came after the white man. And that was a result of our educational system. So when I moved to Dallas, I really started to learn a lot about myself in terms of my culture, my history, and it became all-consuming for me. I mean, I just totally dived into it, and I started studying books by Dr. Ben Yakinen, Dr. Asa Hilliard, beloved Dr. John Henry Clark, and I started finding out how much we as a race did contribute to society, and it gave me a great sense of pride that I'd never known before, because our society tells us if you're white, you're right, if you're black, if you're brown, stick around, if you're black, get back. And we carry that with us, and it becomes, we not only carry it because it becomes manifest in our lives, in what we attain in our lives, because we don't have that self-esteem that white children naturally have, that they feel that they can do anything because their parents tell them they can. But I can remember as a little girl, wishing I were white, because our grandmother was white, and our mother is half and half, and we saw the struggles she had, and we know that it was easier to be white in this society. So we really had an issue with that. So when I moved to Dallas and I started studying all these wonderful books by these wonderful scholars, it did indeed give me a great sense of pride. But I think I've even come to another point in my life because I was totally identifying with my Afrocentricity in my dress, in my hairstyle, in my studies, and I wanted to capture what I did not know and what had been denied me. But now I've come to a new place, and I say that's all good, and it certainly fits in the context of the whole. But even more important, even beyond that cultural experience and that cultural identification, is knowing that we, no matter what race we are all one. We are all of the same essence. We're all made of the same stuff. We choose to come into the various bodies that we choose to come into, be it white, black, Asian, whatever race, whatever the sex is, to have that experience of being in that race and in that sex. I do believe that we cross lines in terms of reincarnating into various sexes, the two different sexes and various races. So I don't think that we can put a whole lot of stock in I'm black and I'm proud, because it's okay to have cultural pride, but I think we have to also know that we are all one. Not only are we all one on this planet, we are all one in this galactic universe. We just have not discovered our galactic brothers and sisters. But in the meantime, we have to learn to get along with our races of our other brothers and sisters on this planet. So I've now developed a more universal attitude rather than a cultural attitude, because I now know that I'm no different from this person, and that person is no different from me, no matter what our color is. So
right.
It's important to have cultural identity and to know who you are and where you came from, but it's important to know that we're all one and to respect each other regardless of our race.
Right, and I feel you on that. And we are, I think those with the higher elevation is kind of like past that. Now, with the current events that have been happening over the years, just in this country alone, would you say that the reason why people are becoming so more spiritual now, it's kind of like when you start hearing things like genetically modified food, being put into food, genetically modified organisms, or you start hearing all these crazy things, people tend to start wanting to really know more. So then first comes the awareness, you know what I'm saying, and then after the awareness, then comes the spirituality. Would you say that there's an agenda when you look at it from a much bigger perspective or a broader set of eyes? Would you say that there seems to be some type of agenda that's actually making people kind of get to their spirituality on another level? Because I can tell you that I keep it at 100. I wasn't motivated. I wasn't as motivated, let's say, 20 years ago as I am now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm just wondering, and the times were different back then than they are now. So I'm just wondering, from a broader perspective, would you say that does it seem like that people are kind of being led toward that on a natural level and as well as an orchestrated level?
I think people are being guided, and I think they're being guided, of course, by the source within them. Since we're all part of God, we have a essence in us, a knowing in us. Number one, we know truth. It's all inside of us because we are part of God. But we have neglected that knowledge and neglected that listening and calling, and for a long, long time. And I think people now have become very frustrated with their planet, the things that are going on in our planet, with the ecology, with the financial world, with
our government,
and there's with our religion. And what they're seeking now is greater truth, the purpose. Why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? What is this all about? What are we doing here? What are we doing to ourselves? What are we doing to our children? So we're beginning to ask important and very, very, very important questions about purpose. And man eventually gets to that point anyway. Some get, as I mentioned earlier, may have mentioned, some will get there quicker than others. But eventually, and it may take many lifetimes, but eventually we all get to those important questions. What is our soul calling forth? Our soul is calling us. And we're now beginning to start to listen to what the soul is asking and calling and creating. And so I think mankind is evolving more on a spiritual level now than ever before, because we're asking the questions and we're getting the answers. And as they say, whenever you seek the question, whenever you ask the question, the master will appear. And that master can be in many, many forms. For me, it was in the form of a number of books, as I mentioned, Conversations with God being probably the top of the list, and the Abraham CD tapes and so forth, and a number of books I've read over the years. And I'm asking these questions, and then suddenly this information appears to me, and so I think it's happening. I think it's a worldwide thing now. We're just becoming more attuned to who we are. We're listening to the soul, the calling of our soul, because we're not satisfied. You can have so much material things, so much money, so many things in your life. The more you get, the more you're dissatisfied, because then you want more and more and more, and it never fills you up inside. It never fills that void, that hole inside. Nothing can do that except a spiritual connection to your source, and that's what people are finally beginning to understand and recognize. It's a void that they're experiencing, and that's what creates drugs and drug addictions and alcohol addictions and sex addictions and all the addictions you've seen. And that's how so many people are struggling and fighting with these addictions, because they're trying to fill that void, that hole inside that they haven't been able to fulfill. And until they connect with their source and connect with the spiritual aspect of who they truly are, they're going to always seek something outside of them. When it's not outside, there's nothing that you can seek that will satisfy you that's outside of you. It's all inside of you.
That's why they say know thyself.
Yes.
Know yourself.
That's
it's not
exactly
about
right.
believing in faith. It's
That's
knowing
exactly right.
and walking in the know. And that's one of the things that I try to perpetuate or try to project out there to my website, IsisWisdom.com. I got a network of 4,000 people on there, and that's one of the things that we constantly try to, encourage the people is to start getting comfortable with receiving the information that they're getting from within, as opposed to looking outside themselves. Because I just kept it 100. I was like, as far as the savior thing goes, Katrina made it pretty clear that we ain't going to get saved on an external level. So we got to get the mindset that we have to be able to depend on ourselves and save ourselves. You know what I mean? As opposed to looking outward. We're at the top.
Right.
We got 30 minutes left on the show. When you guys get a chance, make sure you check out my website, IsisWisdom.com. If you have any questions, press 1 for all the callers. And there's a lot of callers on this call. There's a lot. Press 1. The number is 347-884-8787 if you want to call in and ask a question, or go ahead and ask your questions in the chat room. I have 2 questions from 2 of my members. One of them wanted to know what is your take on Barack Obama? Like, have you received any information about him and his role? And also, one person asked, have you guys had any contact with any ancient African beings through your travels and your experiences with visitations?
Okay, Arlene, you want to take the Barack Obama question?
I'm going to let you take that. I think the jury's out as far as my thoughts. I don't know how I want to say this. I do believe that Barack Obama is a special person. I believe that he is a chosen person. I believe that he wants to make a difference in the lives of Americans. I believe his heart is in the right place. I believe that when he became president, he was sincere in his campaign promises. I believe that he got into the presidency position and found out he's not the one that makes the decisions, that there is a higher power in our government, an unseen government, if you will, that makes the decisions, and he is merely the person that carries them out, and he does the best he can to he has to appease these people, for one thing, this elitist, hidden, secret society or group, because if he doesn't walk that walk, he's going to be assassinated. So all the things he wanted to do, he is being bound and not able to really deliver what he truly wanted to deliver. And I'm hoping that this changes, but this is the way I see it for now. And Shirley, you might want to share what you think.
Well, yes, I totally agree with that. And I believe that, as Erlene explained, he's not in total control of what happened. Other groups have that control, and he's following it. He has to follow it. That's his mandate, to follow. Because you can see so many things he's doing opposite of what he talked about in his campaign promises and his campaigning. so I think his heart is in the right place. I think he wants better for the country, for everyone concerned. But he's following the same agenda. Unfortunately, he's been made to follow the same agenda.
So it sounds to me like the only way that this is going to change is that the people make a change then, because it doesn't seem like that the higher elite has any best interest for the population of people on the planet, let alone Americans. So I guess
That's
this is one of those situations where we're going to just have to, the people are going to have to rise up like they did in Egypt. Speaking of Egypt, did you hear about the thing that they're doing some type of uncovering in Giza now in one of the tunnels underneath the pyramid? That was just talked about like a couple of weeks ago. Have you guys heard anything about that?
I heard about it, but unfortunately what historically happens is when they make these discoveries and they go into these dark places and tunnels and they find these artifacts, they're never brought to light because they're going to show an African origin, and that's what really frustrates me. This Egyptologist right now who is leading all of this, Dr. Hawass, this is not his baby. He, like most of all of the Arabs, moved into Egypt during the 4th century. So this is not his legacy. And I'm very, very disappointed that we're not seeing the truth of what's being found in these pyramids because they don't want to bring it to light. They don't want to show the African origin of civilization as it relates to the findings in these pyramids. So that frustrates me because I can remember a few years back something was supposed to be unearthed that was under the pyramid, but I tried to follow and find out what was shown, but it was suppressed. So much of our culture is suppressed as it relates to ancient Egypt because it will validate that we as an African race were there first, and they don't want to do that.
I got one person just asked a question. It says, what is the identity of this higher power in the government according to your galactic knowledge?
I'm sorry, the identity of what?
They said, what is the identity of this higher power in the government according to your galactic knowledge?
What is the identity of the higher power in the galactic?
In the government. Like when you were saying about the higher power in the government, and he's saying according to your galactic knowledge. He says, what is the higher power? What is the identity of the higher power?
Well, it's not anything that's based on any of my experiences, first of all, because I haven't really been shown anything that relates to that. But I have read and studied, and as well as Erlene, that there are powers that exist, the powers of, as they say, powers of principalities that exist, that entities have been involved with mankind since the inception, since our origin. And some even believe that these entities are actually this interesting question, because on one of the experiences I did have, I was told that we are engineering your genetic structure, which leads one to believe that possibly some of the advanced beings have something to do with our genetics, with our creation, actually. And it's not too unfathomable to believe that they can create life, clone life. We're cloning life. We're cloning animals. So it's not impossible to believe that they could.
We're cloning humans too,
and we're cloning humans.
They're just not telling us.
Exactly.
Now I heard about that, and I do believe that's going on. I've been asking a lot of women here as of lately. I say, hey, when you get these hysterectomies done, where's your uterus going? Mm-hmm. Well, why are so many people popping up with uterine fibroids, and then where is that tissue and things like that going? Like, I'm serious. Like, I think about stuff like that because when you start seeing a mass amounts of people popping up with certain ailments and things like that, you can clearly see a pattern and an agenda in place. So I ask people, I'm like, before they're so quick to cut you, what are they doing with your body parts? How do you know they're not cloning? How do you know that they're not? I put some stuff on the website not too long ago about how they take the blood from the babies and put it in the blood bank, unbeknownst to the parents when the child is born. Mm. They collect DNA. They have a DNA bank that they collect on every single child. What's that about?
Right. Good questions.
You know what I'm saying? Like, why? And then why are you not telling the parents that this is what's going on? Like, they're just literally taking blood from the baby, and they do it so nonchalant that you don't even realize what's going on. And the next thing you know, your child is basically filed. You might as well say the child's DNA is basically filed and goes into some central computer system of records or what have you. And I had to school people about that and let people know, like, you better start asking questions, like, what are they doing with this stuff?
Exactly. Yeah, we need to be asking these questions. We need to be investigating it.
And to that caller's question, I don't know if this is factual, but I've read that there are entities that are interacting with our government. That have some presence and involvement with our government leaders, that whereby they desire to control man, and they do so through our government. And so I don't know, this has not been a result of any of my experiences. However, I have read others who have described this type of thing that has happened. I know Erlene could probably discuss this too, better so, that back in the 50s, our government conspired to have U.S. citizens abducted in exchange for military technology that they wanted.
I've heard about that too. Yeah, that's been talked about quite a good bit. And for those of you who really don't believe the hype, you might want to go check out the National Center for Exploited Children and see how many children were reported in the year 2010, and it was close to 1 million that were abducted or disappeared or missing.
Yes.
And that's a lot of kids.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That's a lot of kids, man. I'm like, where are these kids going?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm looking at the recovery rates and the whole nine. I'm like, those recovery rates ain't very high. So I'm like, where are all these kids? What's going on?
Right.
Well, there's thought behind the Greys, for example, that they have abducted humans and children and cattle and mutilated, and you've seen corpus of mutilated cattle, and that their goal was to create or recreate their genetics through us, through studying our genetics, because they have not been able to emote love and compassion and all of those things. They engineered out of their structure, out of their system, because they didn't want to create warfare and kill themselves. So to do so, they took emotion out of their essence. Now they've learned they went too far the one direction with it. The Greys have. They want it back. They want their emotions back. They want their feelings back. They want to have what we have. They want to feel what we feel. To do so, they have abducted us and studied us to determine how they can re-engineer their genetic structure.
Not only
back.
studied with us, they've made it with us and created hybrids.
Yes.
Yeah. No, aren't they nothing more than just probably the beings of the future?
Well, since all time existed once, as you probably know. So yes, they're our future. They are evolved beings are our future too.
It's like they're our future, but they're like coming through a different dimension and coming back into the past almost.
Exactly.
To do these experiments, but these are actually what they are, what they look like in the future, which is really odd. I don't even know if I'm even making sense right now.
No, you're making perfect sense. That's what I've read too.
Okay, now, one of the things that a couple of my members were asking, and they were trying to get clarification. I'm trying to get clarification as well. Who were the beings that you were in contact with? Who were they?
There were a variety. For example, I did interact with the Greys I mentioned earlier. I interacted with benevolent beings that took me to the Crystal City. They didn't have a name. At least they didn't give me a name. I interacted with beings on a planet called Jupiter Tenor. I wasn't given a name again. I was given the name of the planet, but I wasn't given their name. So I've interacted with most of these entities that I've interacted with didn't have an identity. I don't believe they label themselves as much as our youth are so much into labeling our names, our identifications, as we do here on this planet. So I wasn't given particular names of most of the entities or groups of entities. I had to make up names in some cases. Like I said, the pillow being. I went and visited a planet where an entity looked to me. It looked like it was alive. It had consciousness. It had essence, but it looked like it was made like a pillow. I know that sounds crazy and strange and odd, but that's what it looked like. It didn't give. And again, no names, no like group of entities. We are the blah 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 blah, or we are the blah blah blah. I was never told anything like that, and usually my interactions were so quick, and I would have the time limit was so short in some cases, so I didn't have a lot of time to converse about their identity or their race. I just didn't have that opportunity.
Some people. I'm not sure about the stone people.
Yeah, the stone. I named that group. There's a group that looked like they were. If you can imagine a cartoon and imagine a door that entities that looked like a big door or a big. Another way to describe was in a graveyard. You look at tombstones. Imagine 10 feet tall tombstones that had life, that could move, that had expression, that had features, similar facial features, but were built like a tombstone, a tall 10-foot tombstone or a tall door. They were animated. They were not physical. They didn't give me their name or their race. So I named them. I called them the Stone People because they looked like big, tall stone graveyard stones. And that's all I could do. That's the best I could do with that. So it really, I just didn't get a lot of names, a lot of group names or entities or species or races of names. It was each experience was so uniquely personal and different from another experience. They were all different. It's hard to explain it unless you've read the whole book. They were all so uniquely different.
Right. I just wonder when you got taken up on the ship. Now I'm wondering, did you actually travel in your quote-unquote Merkaba? Are you familiar with the Merkaba?
I've heard of it.
Okay. They say they say each of us have our own individual spaceship, which is called a Merkaba, and I was just curious as to.
Yes, and on some occasions, I have a chapter in the book that, because a lot of people have asked that question, were you physical or did you go astrally projected?
Right.
And I have had both. I'm convinced. I know, as a matter of fact, that I have had both experiences. Some of the experiences involved, again, being broken down, molecules being transmitted through the walls. I can remember just going right through the ceiling, right through the walls. And I would be shocked that how could I do this, but yet I was doing it. And so I would be taken to to a ship and reassembled in physical form. And then I'm examined. And some of these examinations were, and I don't want to get too personal, but when you go to a gynecologist, for example, you have an examination, sometimes it's uncomfortable. Well, that's how I would feel in some of those experiences. I felt the discomfort. I would feel the discomfort for the next day or two. So I knew what they were doing, when they were doing it. So I knew I had my physical body with me on some occasions. One time I came back with a mark on my arm, and I showed it to my sister, my brother-in-law, and some other people. And it was to go to a doctor, have it examined, have them look at it, show you what that is. And I did, and they couldn't identify the marking. There was nothing he could relate to this particular marking that he's ever seen before. And then I think it was Arlene convinced me to tell him my experience, and I did. And, it was not something he learned in college or in med school. He didn't know how to respond to something like that. But he couldn't really give me a response because he was unfamiliar with such markings. So again, back to the question, some of them were physical. Some of them were spiritual, where I astrally projected to another place, another dimension, and it's just amazing. I could fly over like my apartment and look down at my pool, or look down at the trees, or and one night I said, there's the moon. Should I go? Do you want to go? I asked myself, do you want to go to the moon? And I said, no, I don't think so. Not tonight. It felt that freedom. If you remember the old Superman, it's really funny. The old Superman movies where he's flying through the air in such freedom. That's how you feel when you're out of your body. When you're astrally projecting, you feel so fluid, so free. It's a freedom that you can't describe. And there's no fear. Everything is known. And that's another thing. That's probably the reason I didn't ask a lot of questions, because when I'm in that setting, in that place, everything is already known. But when I get back, I'm like, I forgot to ask this. I forgot to ask that. I didn't ask this. I didn't ask them that. And then I'm back in the third dimensional place with memory loss. So I don't know. I've had them both. I've had the experiences both ways.
Right. I got a caller on the air. I got actually two callers that came on, so I'm going to take caller number one. Caller number 6355, you're on the air. Do you have a question for the twins? Caller 635.
I'm not saying don't.
All right, they're not paying attention. Caller number 8038, do you have a question for the twins?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this call. What I need the twins' names and the exact name of the book that she wrote.
Good afternoon to you, and thank you for your interest. Our names are Shirlene Wallace, Shurlene Wallace, Wallace, and my name is Earlene Carr, Earlene Carr, and the name of our book is From the Motherland to the Mothership.
Thank you, and it is great to hear some African American people who have experienced this, because most of the time you hear Caucasian people, and I just had this conversation because I'm on a call on Monday and Sundays and Thursday nights, traveling outside your body. We do have a call on that type of experience. And a lot of the information that is sent to us to help us, transform into such, we get a lot of Caucasians and very few African American, and that was one of my questions. How come it's only very few African Americans who the extraterrestrial contact?
Well, I believe there are more than we realize. It's just that we are primarily as a group, as a culture, it's taboo in our culture, in our communities, this subject. And it again comes from the Christian background. Anything that, anything that we're discussing like this would be considered that if you were going to church, it was demonized, and it was the devil that's doing this.
It's the occult.
Occult, yeah. Are you a part? And I got asked that question. Are you a part of a cult? Matter of fact, when I started having my experiences, I went to a first thing I did was look in the yellow pages and visited a psychologist, because I thought that's what you're supposed to do, and try to make sense of this. And he couldn't help me. He tried to pigeonhole me. Are you to an occult? Or have you ever taken drugs? Or all these questions, none of which applied. So I think as African Americans, we are afraid to discuss our experiences. But as I mentioned earlier, I have had a number of African Americans. A young man in New York emailed me about his experience. A woman in England. A number of African Americans have shared their personal experiences with me and thanked us for what we've done, but they have been afraid because our government and because of religion and because of society overall, they have been afraid to discuss their own experiences, unfortunately. And I hope that's changing. We're trying to make that change. That's why we came out with this story, too. We want it out there. We would have loved to have gotten on Oprah while she had her show, because we thought that would get it out there, but we weren't able to get through all the levels you have to get through, I guess, to get on her show. But that's okay. We're still doing what we do. We do the interviews, and we love to tour or go to do book signings or lectures or whatever we can do to get this information out there and to encourage other African Americans to come out and tell their truth, tell your story. It's freeing in a very real sense, because it's saying you're okay, and that's why it's so important to me is to tell them you are okay. It's okay to tell your truth, tell your story.
Right. Thank you, caller 8038, for your question. And we got 8 minutes left remaining on the call. How do people get in touch with you guys? Because, let me just say this one thing. When I say it took me a year to find you guys, it took me a year to find you guys.
Oh.
Yes, I couldn't. Man, I just couldn't. Because the website, the UFO Twin site, doesn't exist anymore, and so I couldn't find you, and then I had to
right,
because
we've got to get that back up.
Yeah, my network, I just threw it out there hey, I'm trying to find the twins. If anybody's got a contact, please help me. And then one of my contacts from Texas, who actually knows you guys, had shot me your information. That's when I had emailed you guys and whatnot. So,
my. We're so sorry about that.
I certainly am. I can be reached at my AOL address, Shurlene, SHURLENEW, at AOL.com. Also, the book, and I mentioned the lady that asked about the book earlier, we forgot to mention, she can purchase that. Go to Amazon.com and order the book.
or any major bookstore, but it's a print-on-demand book, so you would have to order it and then wait for it to be received by the bookstore.
Right.
Okay.
Arthur'sHouse.com is our publisher, our online publisher, Arthur's House.
Arthur, AUTHOR, house.com.
And also, do you have a Facebook?
Yes, I do.
What is your
just
Facebook?
Look up my name. It's Shirlene Wallace. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there are people who found me through Facebook and discussed I had an offer for another interview through a Facebook for a person that visited me on Facebook. So yes, I am definitely on. My sister isn't early. We haven't gotten her on there yet, but I am on it.
No, I'm not on Facebook yet. I just don't have the time to manage a Facebook page.
Right. Barley, how do they get in touch with you?
My email would be great. It's Lena. I go by Lena for the most part. LENA Carr CARR at Verizon.net.
Okay.
And we are going to put our website back up. We're looking for a new web designer right now, and it will be back up soon.
Okay, cool. I really appreciate the time that you ladies have taken out to talk to us about your experience. And are you having any current experiences right now? I know you said we had the whole thing going on for like 3 years. Are you still having these experiences, or are you not having them as much anymore?
I'm not having them as much anymore, but I still have them from time to time. But I think that I draw them based on the thoughts. For example, tonight I've spoken about these experiences for 2 hours with you and enjoyed every moment of it. I will probably go out to bed tonight and have an experience. That's usually how it happens. If my thoughts are centered on it or some area of spirituality overall, I seem to attract an experience of that nature.
Oh, wow. All right, well, hopefully I'll be able to go to sleep tonight, and I can also get my astral travel on, too, see if I have any experiences. I'm having a different kind of experience right now with my evolution. I'm more so having things going on concerning nature, where I'm really starting to see and experience things on a different level from that aspect. And then there's times where I'm driving my car, and then something will happen, and I'm driving my car in the same spot that I just drove in like 5 minutes ago, and I was trying to figure out how the heck I got there when I just left. I mean, it's just crazy. Stuff like that's going on, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's a whole nother conversation for a different day. But
we'll have to do it again.
Yes, we're definitely going to do that again. I really appreciate you ladies. And for those of y'all who are taking the time out to listen to my show, I got James Reddyfield from the Celestine Prophecy coming on the Isis Wisdom Show. If you guys don't get a chance, I want you guys to go and read his book called The Celestine Prophecy. Read 1 through the 10th Insights. He's definitely coming on. He's going to drop the science about some of the changes that humanity's coming into as far as their spirituality and their elevation. Also got Dr. Blair coming back on the show, so make sure you guys stay tuned to that. In the meantime, check out my website, IsisWisdom.com. If you're trying to get in touch with me, Facebook.com/IsisWisdom or Twitter.com/IsisWisdom. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to y'all next week. Peace.